Good day and welcome to the VMware's multi-cloud podcast series. My name is Eric Nielsen, and with me today I have my co-host, David Jasso. David, welcome to the show. This is our very first podcast series for multi-cloud.
Thanks, Eric. Happy to be here.
Let's just talk a little bit about why we're doing a cloud podcast, a multi-cloud podcast series from VMware. Me and you have talked a little bit about all the activity that's happening in multi-cloud now, and if you look at the number of clouds VMware is supporting, it's interesting. Why did you think about spinning up a podcast just on these subjects?
Yeah, the idea behind this is really to have something that's really focused on architects, builders, people that are operators, and really provide a channel for them to get a lot of rich information. VMware does a great job engaging with customers and accounts, but we tend to really engage the technical influencers downstream, as part of the sales process. And this was just a great opportunity to start getting more information out ahead of that and just helping people get spun up, particularly when you think about all the new things we're doing.
Yeah, and I think from an audience perspective, this really is targeting at that cloud architect who really does have to, when you look at how you're going to roll out multi-cloud or even select a cloud solution, you have to look at the architecture and all the pieces that need to be put together. And we were just seeing more and more topics that are just focused on the cloud architect versus the traditional IT practitioner.
Yeah, if you think about a traditional IT practitioner, particularly our audience is, deep in the data center and, focused on all the technologies within the data center, but more and more our audience is really people that are looking beyond the data center and really thinking about how do I operate in a cloud environment, how do I build net new cloud native apps. So it's really incumbent on us to really start to get more information into the hands of those people, and they're not our traditional audience.
Well, good, and I'm kind of excited about doing this because I do podcasting. So I'll tell you guys a little bit about myself. But before, David, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? How long have you been at VMware? What have you done in the industry? Let's give our listeners that are joining in with us to go on this multi-cloud podcast journey a little bit of information about yourself.
Yeah, great. Thanks for asking. So I've been with VMware just over 8 years. I came over when we were really launching our management business. So people know vRealize, but it started out as vRealize Operations was really the first thing we launched. And I came over with actually a number of people that came over from Hewlett Packard at the time to launch that business. And, we started with that. We grew that business. We added some new capabilities beyond operations. We added automation. We added business management. And now it's a rocking business here at VMware, and it's done well. And then about a year and a half ago, I moved over to the corporate marketing team, focused on cloud marketing. So I've been with that team, really helping to expand what we're doing in that area. So that's, brings me to where I am now.
What'd you do before you came to VM?
Yeah, VMware? Life before VMware. Actually, kind of two lives. One was sort of, right out of college, I did some consulting, then went back, got my MBA, and after my MBA, joined Hewlett Packard and spent a good number of years there.
Sure.
Actually, was kind of all over, did a lot of different things. Was in finance, and then I joined the software support business doing data warehousing projects. And then after that, went back and I was at corporate again, where I focused on running the operations and finance for the legal department. I was working for the general counsel at the time. And then from there, branched off, went back into the businesses and was in software, really joined software. And life, my current path really began there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And a lot of world experience, but then settling down into software and IT.
Yeah,
right?
I settled down. I actually, first role out there was really working with was engineering management, basically working with engineering and marketing, sort of the release cycle stuff. Bringing it all together. And then I worked for the CTO of software, which was a great experience and sort of where I started to really get involved with cloud before it was called cloud. Because a heavy focus on automation and IT modeling and bringing those things together.
Sounds like a great story, and looking forward to bringing some cool guests in to expand the architectural discussion around how to implement cloud solutions. So, yeah, nice history. My own history kind of starts when I graduated college. I went to IBM and worked at IBM in Boca Raton on the original PC XT80 when we did MS DOS.
All right,
so
cool.
that kind of sets my age, right? I've been around for a while. I got a degree in software from University of Florida in software programming in University of Florida. I also did a dual degree in marketing. So I did both, and IBM kind of was a marketing group, but I worked in software and built business applications for IBM in Boca Raton for the original PC XT18 line.
Cool.
So that's where...
I have to say I remember using that line.
Yeah, there you go. It became popular, and if we had only done the license right with Mr. Gates, we wouldn't have had a clone market, but that's IBM's mistake. And then I actually left IBM. They moved out of South Florida, and I worked for a company in Miami, and I actually ran a data center, right? So
cool.
I love SCO Unix at the time, right? We used SCO Unix to run the data center back at the time, small systems, right? And then slowly, eventually, then worked there a few years, ran the data center. Then it came to California and got back into software engineering, where I worked on for Lockman Associates doing small Unix port, right? They competed against SCO Unix. Then moved up to Silicon Valley and ended up at Sun Microsystems. Sun bought Lockman to do their own version of Solaris.
All right.
And so worked in the OS group and managed an OS group. Worked in the operating systems team in MPK-17 at Sun for many years, probably 10 years. And then eventually left, and we actually started getting into virtualization with an N1 product, which was $1 per minute per CPU kind of paradigm. And I thought that the startup VMware had a much more interesting paradigm where they encapsulated the entire payload in one big unit, right, which was the VM at the time, or a VM. And so then came to VMware because I thought that technology was better, but at the same time started getting back to my marketing roots, where I thought social media and community marketing was much more interesting. And so I switched and came and started to learn marketing, right? Which was
that's awesome. Yeah,
big move.
Thinking about joining, when I was thinking about joining VMware, one of the really big projects at the time was Project Redwood, if you recall what Redwood was about. That was really around what became vCloud Director, basically, and the foundations for the software-defined data center, and moving us to really starting to tackle cloud type issues.
And I still have racks at San Jose that I run for fun projects. I got a cage, and I run vSphere there, and so spend some time dabbling with the tech at the same time. Got my VCP along the journey. Been here 12 plus years, and it's been fun to watch the company go from virtualization, the core of P2V, right? And that value proposition into storage, and then into networking, and now into cloud, right? And I've come along with the journey. I do social media evangelism, so I run a weekly podcast already, and this one is, I think, much more technical, focused on the architects, and so ability.
That's exactly right. Our goal really is to focus on the architects in this program. The builders, the operators, people that really need some technical depth. Where we're as a company, as you said, we've sort of expanded so much. We're now focusing on modern apps and managing the public cloud directly. And, what we're trying to present to, the technical audience is a full scope of materials that help them really understand, how that all comes together. Because if you don't see that bigger picture, it kind of feels like, this sort of isolated, we're in this and in that. But, the reality is it's a pretty broad scope, and it all makes sense. I mean, the kind of things we're driving through with the portfolio are really around this idea of seamless portability across any environment, multi-cloud, really, right? Where I'm not just on Amazon, I'm not just in the data center. I can easily move across all of that. Right. Helping organizations accelerate their application portfolios. There's this quote floating around that comes up all the time. This idea that more software will be built in the next 5 years than was built in the last 40 years, right? So that's being built as cloud native. So We want to be able to help people with that too. And then finally, connecting the dots all the way back to what our sort of roots were, right? To virtualization in the data center, and then extending that to the full stack, and then running that now in all the hyperscalers. And it's a pretty broad spectrum, but most people aren't even aware of it. Most people, even our traditional audience. I spent last month. I was out a couple different DevOps days. I was in Portland, and I was in also in Boston. And, I would start every conversation like, how familiar are you guys with what we've been doing in the last couple of years? And they're like, zero, right? It's like, no, I'm not familiar. I know you guys maybe as a hypervisor company. And so I'd start with telling them about modern apps and then working backwards to public cloud. And it was
right. And there's just a lot of information out there that our traditional guys don't know.
Absolutely.
And I'll give you the example I like to point out is Imad Benjamin, right, who will be our first guest on our next podcast, is talking about a cloud runtime, right? And when you get into a cloud runtime, right, like what is a cloud runtime, right? And he gets fairly technical on components you need in an architecture to have a truly multi-cloud cloud runtime that would be available that allows your cloud native app to move from point A to point B, right, and have all the features you need in order to support that application.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great example of the kind of content we want to put in the hands of our audience, where he's talking about a runtime across any cloud, right? Not just how you would run on the public cloud, or how you run in the data center, or even how you run in a hybrid cloud. It's like, how do you take, and specifically, I think what he's a big part of this is this notion of a service mesh, right? Which most people think about in the context of containers. How do you take that concept and really extend it to multi-cloud, and you're dealing with traditional applications as well, and unify their performance across any environment?
Right.
That's the kind of things that Ahmad's working on.
So let's talk a little bit about the persona of who we're talking about, which is the cloud architect. I know you guys have done some research on who is the cloud architect. Why don't you take us through a little bit of who we identify as cloud architects?
So I spent a lot of time as part of spinning up this project talking to different folks, both within the company that had a view to this persona, as well as talking to some of these people directly that are our customers. And what you find is that they really form the bridge between what the business wants to do and then what is available in the cloud. So these people typically are deeply spun up on one or more of the public clouds, but they're also now having to branch back and think about what's happening in the data center and how does that become part of the picture. What's interesting about these folks is, you ask them how they get information, and it's no surprise that for many of them their first visit is to Google, right? I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and and then whatever pops up, they follow the breadcrumbs, right? But they tend to lean towards easily digestible information in the beginning. So YouTubes and podcasts like this are important. But also, they spend a lot of time on the hyperscalers, right? Trying to figure out what they're doing. I think as we progress, there's a recognition that, in a multi-cloud world, I can't just rely on the hyperscalers. They're not going to give me all the answers. The other thing that was really interesting, and I think that this was really exciting to me, was this idea that these folks are continuous learners, but they're also willing to relearn things that are sort of, you would think, are settled ground, basically, but they need the cues from the marketplace to go do it. So I think that's what's really sort of amazing and appealing about this audience, is just how voracious they are about learning new things.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's interesting because when you're considering multi-cloud, what I'm seeing in the industry is that different clouds have different offerings that they excel at, right? Mm-hmm. And so a true architecture that's going to win I'm going to pull some features from Google because they have really good features in this particular market segment, right?
Yep,
whether
absolutely.
it be AI, right? So Google excels in AI. So when you're offering up your business units or an architecture for AI, ignoring Google is not a good thing, right? And your business is going to come drive you to that. And so yet at the same time, when you look at AWS and what they're good at, right?
Yep.
And look at Amazon, Microsoft and Azure and what they're good at, it turns out that architecturally you can go with single cloud, but over time you're going to have to learn how to weave in these best of breed services coming from the other hyperscalers.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think a lot of organizations today tend to focus almost in a monocloud kind of operation, but the reality is, there's things that are running in the data center that they have to connect to. There's things that are running in different providers that they'll want to take advantage of. As you said, you think about this as access to innovation, and so I think we are approaching this world where people have to be able to tie things together more seamlessly than they have been able to up to this point.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you're running a cloud marketing program, and I don't think we mentioned your title, which is Director of Cloud Marketing at VMware. What do you kind of expect to get out of your program as you go forward?
Yeah, I think the things we're trying to do is, as I said, provide more access to technical content across a broad range of topics that relate to the key areas of focus for the company. So, how do you do hybrid cloud? How do you do, multi-cloud, integrate beyond the hybrid cloud to public cloud? How do you do modern apps? So the content we're really developing and trying to work across with a lot of people is focused on going deeper in those areas, right? Providing them access to information that really helps them broaden their perspective. A lot of awareness building, but we'll still have content, but we'll also be at events. And providing webinars and other vehicles for them as well.
I see a connectivity in your program to our traditional products as well. Yesterday I was talking, the vRealize Operations guys, 8.0 was out, and they start talking about vRealize Operations 8 being a SaaS service, and that we're going to be offering up a vRealize Operations SaaS on cloud. I never actually asked them which cloud they're actually going to spin this up on, but you can see that even traditional, what we call heritage apps, which is our core technologies, are going to be part of that cloud architecture that you're going to have to choose how to roll out. Even heritage apps, can end up in the cloud.
Yeah, I love the word heritage apps, right? We were trying to not say legacy anymore, heritage and vintage.
Right.
But absolutely right. And the vRealize suite's a great example of something that's evolving really to be part of this multi-cloud picture. I mean, the primary focus is around extending initially around hybrid cloud and being able to support that kind of environment. But yeah, I think the whole portfolio, over time, just becomes part of what we're doing across that multi-cloud landscape. And vRealize is a great example. They've been moving forward for quite some time. Actually, they started with taking vRealize automation and then automating a lot, creating a SaaS service for that. It was really an evolution beyond what vRealize was, and now you're seeing with Ops. So I think the whole portfolio is coming forward in that way and becomes part of this picture of multi-cloud.
And there's some great architectural components to it that our cloud architects are going to need to know about. There's a proxy that proxies data back and forth from your enterprise out into cloud services. And how do you set up those proxies? How secure are they? Needing to know the architectural details, because if you're designing this as a solution for your company, these details matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Architect matters. And in fact, there's some great stuff coming out by Greg Lavender, our new CTO, where he makes the point that if you don't focus on architecture, it's really hard to be successful bringing things together. And given the sort of intricacy and the level of interconnection between all these different cloud environments. And so, he says something along the lines of, it's really hard to be successful if you have a crappy architecture or something like that.
Now, we're going to bring listeners along this journey of a podcast, right? And one of the things I gotta ask you, are we allowed to talk about failures too? I mean, I look at online, I did the Google thing, right? I go out and I Google, how did these guys do this, right? And then I always get some interesting videos that talk about, well, we implemented this, and here are the 3 areas that we have to do differently next time we do this. Are we allowed to also look at some of the use cases and failures
I
to
think absolutely.
help architects understand good ways and bad ways and learn from the community's mistakes?
Yeah, I think being able to talk about failure and things that didn't work in the context of what do you do, right? What is the right answer? Super important, right? Because you've got to learn from, I think there's this quote floating around. It's life's too short to make all the mistakes yourself. You have to be able to learn from the mistakes of others.
Right. So those topics, obviously, use cases and best architectural components. Are there other things that we should be covering on this?
Podcast?
We're
in the first pass of this, and we've tried to identify some really good meaty areas that are important to people broadly, right? Particularly new audience as well. And so we'll be digging into them to really sort of look at all the architectural components. What are the offerings? How do they work? And, great examples. What's happening with VMware Tanzu now, right? I think particularly within the company, this, right? Everybody's asking, what's going on with Tanzu? What's going on with Tanzu, right? And what are we doing? So for those that aren't familiar, Tanzu really represents our modern apps portfolio. And, it's brand new, quite frankly. A lot of people don't know about it, so it's a great opportunity to get out new information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually I misspoke in that the first release of our multi-cloud podcast is actually on Tanzu.
Exactly.
And then we're doing eMod next,
Yep.
right? And we actually have Tanzu recorded in the bag, ready to release next week,
that's right.
Which is great. And that's exactly it. If you start looking at the architecture of Tanzu and you talk to the Heptios people, we do, and you listen to their design paradigm, it's like stuff I'd never heard before,
Yep.
right? And I don't want to say I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but I think that if you are really building, service mesh networks or architectures, and you're looking at how to do hybrid cloud native versus heritage apps
Yep.
and how those plug together, these topics are stuff that traditionally, if I'm an IT guy trying to lay out stuff, I haven't had to really deal with this. So some of these experts that we're bringing in really do bring stuff that I hadn't really ever thought of or heard of. So it's going to be great.
You hit it on the head. I think you think about some of the things that were announced at VMworld around Tanzu project specific.
Right.
Sorry about that. In particular, is a great example, right, where we're really bringing Kubernetes to the masses, right, where that becomes part of vSphere, very tightly integrated with vSphere. So I think that's really exciting. The other thing that team's looking at, which is the primary reason we wanted to talk to them, was around this notion of mission control, which allows you to sort of unify your management of Kubernetes clusters wherever they're at, whatever cloud they're on, however they were created, and that's pretty exciting as well.
Yeah. All right. So we're setting up for the year. I know we're going to be at VMworld, so we can add in a little real time into the podcast. Hopefully, so maybe we can tell some jokes along the way, so we can have some fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you guys who are listening can get to know myself and David. David's a great guy. I'm a great guy, I think. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it should be a good journey. And I think the people that we're going to be interviewing are far superior in intelligence and knowledge when it comes to these topics than we are.
Exactly.
So we'll just probably try to be your guide. And if people want to reach out to us and give us topic ideas that you're facing in a multi-cloud environment, you're a cloud architect, we'd love to hear from you guys, right?
Yep.
And I'm on Twitter at ERICNIPRO.
Yep.
So you can always follow me. I cross-follow everyone back. And then you can direct message us and give us some ideas. Or if you think that you have something valid, you'd like to come on the show and be a part of the show, certainly give us some ideas, and we're happy to expand that. I assume they can reach out to you too, and you're probably on Twitter as well.
David J at 7494.
David J at 7494.
Say David J 7494.
David J 7494. So it's at David J 7494. Is there 7,000?
No,
494 David J's out there,
no,
73, so you got the extra one?
A one I could remember, basically.
7494. David J at 7494. So give us a follow. We'll follow you back. You can direct tweet us and tell us what topics are of interest to you. I know we have some topics on board that we're gonna be recording for the rest of the year. Do we know what our cadence is for this?
Yeah, we're shooting for about every 3 weeks is sort of how we're going to come out.
Right.
We may accelerate that as we go.
Right.
But and on some of those topics, additional ones, just highlight a few that are we know about, but we'll add to this as we go, and we'll continue to do new things on the topics we already have slated. We've got some great stuff coming up with Bill Shetty. He leads a team of cloud evangelists, and they've been doing a ton of work around in the area of continuous integration, continuous delivery, and taking our products and taking other third-party products and bringing those together and showing how they work together, and how you integrate them and how do you bring them into a continuous integration, continuous delivery process. A big part of what they're doing is this idea called continuous verification. How do you bring more work that tends to be post deployment into the deployment process? So that's one area. Another area that we're looking at is really around multi-cloud management. We've expanded our portfolio into this area of cost optimization and security for public clouds with the acquisition of Cloud Health and the addition of Secure State. And we're going to explore those in depth as well. And then another area is a guy named Tom Hyde, as part of our professional services, came in with a great company called Momentum SI, probably 5-6 years ago now. And they're doing some very great work around how to use data requirements to then identify what you want to do, how you want to build your apps in a multi-cloud environment. So a few of the examples. There'll be many more.
That sounds awesome. I look forward to getting Jeff Bezos on the podcast so we can talk AWS, and maybe we'll get somebody from Microsoft. Oh, it's a CEO of Microsoft. We'll bring him in. No, we're not aiming that high.
Yeah.
We're really targeting the technical leaders who are actually helping build out. I mean, I even look at Joe Beto from Heptio, and he runs his Friday podcast where he talks about live stream on just really in-depth topics. And so even getting everybody exposed to the ecosystem and just be a pointer for other great things that are happening around multi-cloud, I think is part of what we're trying to accomplish here as we bring guests in to talk about things.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for almost all these areas, there are other content that will be available, but we'll use this to, highlight
showcase
them.
Yep.
And showcase them, and then also point people to that content as well.
Yep, perfect. And so once every 3 or 4 weeks is great, because I think what we want to spend time is actually, building a good agenda, building a tight agenda. I run a weekly podcast where it's community oriented. Mm-hmm. We don't have a very tight agenda because it's just we want to have them every week to say hello to the community. Where this one is really, we're going to drill down on the topics, make sure that the guys that are coming in have the topics they want to cover, so that you're not wasting your time just listening to us banter. And I think that Emad Benjamin and the guys from Heptios were great guests that really have some detailed topics to cover that are good for cloud architects.
Absolutely. Yep.
Right. All right. Well, this is just an intro to the multi-cloud podcast and multi-cloud, because we're on Amazon AWS, we're on Microsoft Azure, we're on IBM Blue something.
IBM Cloud. All the hyperscalers, and then those other big clouds as well.
Right. Yep. So hopefully we can sit at the top level and cover topics that cross all of those clouds. And I hope everybody joins and puts us on their iTunes podcast list. We'll be publishing them on iTunes, and hopefully we'll get them on Google Play as well. And then we'll also put them up on TalkShoe, so that multi-places you can go pull them down, add them into your commute rotation if you got a commute. If you don't, lucky you. And hopefully we can be part of your educational journey as we go forward. So
yeah, looking forward to it.
David, thanks a lot. I'm looking forward to it as well. And we will we have the next one in the can. So we're going to record Emad Benjamin on the
application platform,
application runtime.
Yep.
Right, for clouds, and then we'll move on. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you again in 3 weeks.
All right. Thank you so much.